Thank you.
We've got about 55, 56 that have answered so far, so we'll give it another minute or two.
Perfect. Well, thanks. I hope you don't mind me, if you don't mind doing the poll for me.
No. Just when you get ready, holler, and I will launch them. I wonder why it didn't work on your computer.
I know.
All right, just another minute or so, or not really a minute. Let's do about 30 more seconds on the poll.
Perfect.
We have they're still kind of answering as of right now.
Perfect.
It looks like our majority of our folks today is going to be from the school districts. There is not any showing up from the daycares or the day sponsors on the CACFP program.
Perfect.
So it looks like we're going to be talking to schools
today.
Okay, and I see Fran has raised her hand. Fran, if you have a question, put it in the chat. And while Kendra is going over the slides on the PowerPoint, I will be answering the questions that you have in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, so let's go ahead and get started because it looks like we have a majority that have gone on now. So, okay. So again, we're talking about procurement today. We're going to talk about what is procurement. We're going to talk about the methods of procurement, awarding the bid, if you're going to contract for any food service. Some of it we'll kind of go over a little bit for a school district. Most of that section kind of has to do with daycare. So I won't cover a lot of that. I'll just cover what's important for the schools. We're going to talk about how do you manage the contract and then records. And this training should be about a 2-hour training. We will send out a certificate probably tomorrow. And then if anybody does miss this training, or if you are wanting this training again, we're going to be putting this out in our OK Edge series. You'll be able to go out there at any time. The video will be out there that we are recording today. But if you don't have to do the quiz at the end to get a certificate because you already got one. But if somebody does want hours, they will have to take the quiz to get those hours. So just to FYI to let you know that this will be available after today is finished. So what is procurement? Procurement is a multi-step process for obtaining equipment, services, materials, or supplies for the lowest price. All goods and services purchased with child nutrition funds must be procured using these federal guidelines. It is a requirement. We can actually ask you to pay back child nutrition if something was not procured correctly. Because if it's not procured correctly, then you're not supposed to be using child nutrition funds for that. So just remember, I mean, we take it very seriously. Since we have all schools today, you all should be aware, we now do 2 separate reviews. We do a procurement review, and we also do an administrative review. So USDA takes this very seriously that they started a separate procurement review over child nutrition funds. So what is the purpose of procurement? So the biggest purpose of it is that this is federal dollars, and they want to make sure that you're using free and open competition. They just want to make sure that you are kind of getting the best bang for your dollar, because it is federal dollars that you are spending, not just local. It is federal dollars that you are spending. Again, anything that is spent with child nutrition funds must be procured using USDA guidelines. And there, again, when we talk about the methods, there's a lot of confusion. So hopefully this will clarify some things and make it much easier to understand what procurement is versus just when you look at it, it looks very daunting. So hopefully we give you enough resources to where it's very helpful for you. So let's talk about some things that are not allowed. So again, all goods and services purchased with child nutrition funds must be procured. We have some entities. So if, for example, if you do have anything that you use that goes for more than just child nutrition, you do have to prorate it. So if you are spending money on, so for instance, I'm trying to think like at a daycare, a lot of times they buy paper towels for the entire center, even though it's used for CACFP, and it's also used for the daycare center. You have to prorate those costs based on use. Same thing, if you're a school district, say you're paying utilities, or say you have labor cost. and they do multiple jobs. You have to prorate it, and you can only pay what they're actually using or spending with child nutrition. So you can't, if someone works 50% of their time in the kitchen and 50% of their time as a teacher's aide, you can only have 50% of their salary go from child nutrition. So how do you prepare for procurement? So in order for the procurement process to be successful, it's advised that you take a course like this, just to know what the procedures are, what the methods are, and kind of what's expected. Now, we're not expecting perfection. None of us are. I mean, so Dana, Mona, and I did procurement reviews for 3 years. All the consultants did it for 1 year, and then Dana, Mona, and I took it for 2 years and did it solely. We learned a lot in that time. Like, it's a learning process for everybody. I will tell you, and we'll talk about it again, but the procurement reviews are done by, it's called DWG Consulting, and Dickerson is the main contact. She may even be on this call right now. So don't be surprised. We have contracted those reviews out because it's a bigger job than when we were doing them. It was just hard. That's why we split it up for some consultants to do all of them. So just a reminder, just get familiar with the process. Again, we're all learning. We're going into our second cycle of procurement reviews. So this is nothing new that we are doing. This is going into our 4th or 5th year. COVID has really thrown me a year off, but I think this is our 4th year to do procurement reviews, or 4th or 5th year. So what do you need to do? You need to plan. How do you do this? What are your potential contractors or vendors? Like, who are they? What goods and services do you need? What is your procurement schedule that makes sense for your district? So these are some things you need to think about before you start. And some of this will be in your procurement plan, which we will also discuss. So procurement starts really with a planned menu. You need a forecast. How much food are you going to need for the next year? What sources of matching the products? What do you want from your possible suppliers? These are things, it's the first thing that you should think about is how much food do you need to buy? What kinds of products that you want or what you need. Remember, anything purchased with child nutrition funds must be procured. And I'm talking even if it's pest control. If you are going to pay for it with child nutrition dollars, you must procure it per USDA guidelines. Okay, so just if you're going to spend money on it, child nutrition, you have to procure it with USDA standards. And we saw that quite a bit. We were doing reviews that they're like, oh, well, this is who we use for the school, so we're going to pay it out of child nutrition. Well, if you're going to pay any of it out of child nutrition, you must procure using USDA regulations, not local regulations, USDA regulations. And when we talk about this, we've suggested this to some schools. It's okay if you have a separate procurement plan for child nutrition only, and then a separate local school policy. Because when we talk about the dollar amount and what you have to do, it makes a lot of sense that you probably have a separate procurement plan for child nutrition than what you do for your local district. Because it is different, and it can throw you into making you do a lot more things than you have to do unless you have just 2 separate policies. So forecasting, you need to come up with your menus for the year. What are the number and ages of children that you're going to serve? Don't forget to include your USDA food. So that's some stuff that you can back out. And then all of your inventory assessment. Make sure you're looking at your inventory. I've been into some situations where people never looked at their inventory. They just purchased. I mean, they had an inventory, some of them, but when we went in there, they had so much food. I had one school that was able to do their full summer feeding program based on what they had in inventory, because the cook would just order the same thing every 2 weeks and never looked at inventory to see what they had in stock, what they did not have to purchase. So what is the purpose of procurement? Again, it needs to be free and open competition. It's fairness and integrity. You need to have transparency And you can only give your services to people that are responsive and responsible. Now, I understand, I'm from a very small town in Oklahoma. We understand that you may not be able to get a ton of bids back or anything like that, and that's okay. Your requirement is to send bids out. It's not a requirement for them to respond. So when we do, you can even say, and it's happened where people are like, well, no one will come service me, so I'm only going to give it to this one person. That's not procurement. You still have to have free and open competition. And you never know, people's territories might change. And this has happened. People, they have different service areas and open the service area up and was able to supply to more people. So again, just because in your mind you think nobody else will service you, it's still a requirement that you have to reach out to multiple people, which we're going to talk about. So who all can you reach out to? There's growers, manufacturers, distributors, and then of course you are the end user. With schools, we do have some co-ops that you could possibly use, or maybe usually with a manufacturer and distributor, you have a sales rep. And then the government agency, that's a lot of USDA foods and such like that. Most of you are going to go straight to a distributor. Some of you might go to a grower. We have our farm to everything situation, so you can always go out to a grower as well. So we're going to first talk about your procurement plan. So a procurement plan is a plan that you have that has, it must include certain items, but the big thing is it's your methods of procurement. It's how do you procure? So before you guys are like, and I think since we mostly have schools on here, you guys are all aware, we do have a procurement plan prototype that you can adopt for your school district. So it's going to meet all of our requirements for USDA. Everything, so the reason I kind of only send out slides is because we do have CACFP and we do have the school side. Everything you need for procurement is located in the procurement section in either other documents or the resource library if you're a daycare. So our procurement plan prototype is located in CARS and other documents under procurement section. There's one that says interactive forms and examples, and you click on it. It makes it, it's a zip file, so it may make you save it. So if you just save it, wherever you save it at, it's going to download everything that was in that file. And then if it lets you open it up, you'll find the procurement plan prototype. For schools, it's about 14 pages long. And then for daycares, it is about 3 pages long. So there is a difference what schools have to do versus daycare. But you do have to have a board approved procurement plan. That's the first thing Robin's going to ask for. Make sure it is your latest one. And I'm going to go ahead and say this, since I did procurement reviews, make sure you have the latest one. Go to our website. The one that we have had out there hasn't changed in 2 years. The reason I say that is there's some entities, some schools that will contract out to do their policies and procedures. And a lot of them have an old procurement plan that doesn't work anymore. Just so make sure that you look at the one that we have in our system and it has everything in there, or you can use this list. You have to have methods of procurement. You have to have a chart of procedures, a code of conduct, protest procedures. You also have to have Buy American if you're a school district. You have to have a statement regarding minority firms, women's business enterprise, and labor surplus. Information about geographical preference and beverage contracts. So again, you can find our prototype in the resource library or in other documents in CARS. You print it out, or you can open it up. It's a Word document, I believe, and you do need to put your school name on there. And then there are certain questions that you have to fill out. But it lets you have a little bit of wiggle room, but I will tell you it does meet all of our guidelines. So if you are using our prototype, you're going to be fine when it comes to your review. And we do highly suggest that you do use ours. It is USDA, because in that way it's not so overwhelming or so daunting. One of the things that are in there is your methods of procurement. This is the big thing the big thing about the procurement plan. We're going to go over informal methods and formal methods. So there is wiggle room in there. So there are we're going to go over the federal requirements. The school district can choose to have a smaller amount, and that is fine, but you'll put it in the procurement plan. So when Robin asks to see your procurement plan, we're going to go by the information in your procurement plan, not by the federal guidelines. So I've had some schools that their formal threshold is $7,000, not the $250,000 that is required that the USDA allows. So you need to make sure whatever you have in your procurement plan, that's what we're going to be looking at when we do a review to make sure you're doing things correctly. You do have to have a chart of procedures, and this is what the chart of procedures looks like. What this is it tells us how often you're going to obtain a bid, or you're going to do price quotes, or however you're going to procure it, and then it tells us the method that you're going to use. So I'm trying to think of schools. I think it's in the procurement plan. I think it's in that 14 pages. We also put a checklist in there as well, so that's why it's a little bit longer. With CACFP, I don't believe the chart of procedures is in the actual procurement plan, but there is where you can click on it and open it up. This is an example, and you do both have an example of the chart of procedures in your training manuals. So go, if you're a school district, to the procurement section, same with CACFP. So again, this is what the chart of procedures is. It's just telling us how often you're going to get price quotes or go check prices, and then you're going to tell us what is the method of procurement that you used when you purchased that. Okay, so let's talk about informal procurement. This is the most common, and I'm going to tell you right now, if you do not have to do formal, we would suggest not doing formal. These are the ones that mostly, I'm hoping, if you can, and most schools in Oklahoma can do informal procurement. So this is where people get a little bit confused. All people do is look at the dollar amount, and if you see on here, it says it does not exceed $10,000 per aggregate transaction. Don't get hung up on the dollar amount right now. A school, you'll need to look at the dollar amount, but don't get hung up on it right now. This is how you're procuring it. What micro purchasing is that you are buying from multiple qualified sources. You don't check any prices. The price must be reasonable. Now, we do have a note in here because this is most commonly used for daycare centers, because daycare centers are not big enough to use a vendor like schools are. They mostly go to Walmart, to Brahms, to Crest, places like that, research, to get their food and milk and everything they need for CACFP. But if you're using a vendor, this is not the route to take. This is mostly going to be used in emergency situations for a school district. Because, for instance, you may be using micro purchasing. You have a vendor that you use, but maybe hot dog buns weren't on the truck that day. So you're going to just run down to your local school. You're going to run down to your local store and just buy hot dog buns. You're not checking prices, but it is spreading the wealth, because you actually do buy your food from somebody else and get other supplies from other people. So again, as a school district, this is mostly in emergency situations. A daycare center, you have to be buying things from multiple locations. So like you're buying stuff from Crest, from Research, from Walmart, from Sam's, from Staples. You have to buy from multiple qualified suppliers. That's what that means. Most schools do not buy from multiple suppliers. They usually buy for like one or two. So again, you have to spread the wealth. You can't just purchase from one source with micro purchasing. Purchases must be regularly made using multiple available qualified sources. And these sources can be similar or dissimilar, meaning like paper. You may buy your paper from Staples, but then you buy your food from Walmart, you buy food from Sam's, you buy your some supplies from Amazon. You're spreading the wealth. You're buying multiple things from multiple sources. Again, this is mostly used for our daycare centers because they're not big enough to, no vendor will service them. So they have to go out and buy certain things. But again, if you're not spreading the wealth, if you're not buying from multiple sources, then you're not doing micro purchasing. You're going to be doing what the most common one is. Here's the micro purchase example is, again, when like for a school district, is it may not be like, if we talked about the example of the hot dog buns, it doesn't make it on the truck. So you're just going to go to your local store and just buy hot dog buns, and as long as the price is reasonable, which they usually are, and you don't have much of a choice. Now, if you were buying, say, hot dog buns for $10 a loaf, that really wouldn't be reasonable, and we would probably question that. But again, micro purchasing is buying from multiple sources. Again, a school will mostly use this in emergency situations because you're buying things from these vendors, but you are not checking prices, but you need it. So you're going to go out and get it at that time. Most of you are going to be doing what we call small purchase procedures. And again, this is what we highly recommend if you're a school. If you can do this, if you spend under $250,000 per bid or solicitation. We have some schools that, of course, they do go over this amount, but if you do not, and it's with a vendor, so whatever you do per bid or per vendor, as long as you're under that amount, you can do small purchase. Well, what is small purchase? You can have it, and just a reminder, and this does happen with schools, you can have a threshold lower than this, and we see it quite a bit. A matter of fact, a lot of people are using, when I say you're using the old procurement plan, the old procurement plan may see $100,000 or $150,000, and you can keep it at that. But the federal guidelines are $250,000, but your school can be lower than that. I've seen a school have their threshold at $7,000. But again, if that is the case, you may tell them, it's a lot of work because it's a lot of work to do procurement for USDA for child nutrition. So you may want to talk to somebody and be like, hey, can we adopt a separate procurement for child nutrition and follow those guidelines, and then use a different one for school if you're purchasing with local funds? So that is something that you can think about. We have suggested it before, and we do have some schools that have done that because it does make it hard when you're doing procurement for child nutrition when the rest of the school is not spending the kind of money that you might be spending. Now, this is what small purchase is. Small purchase is when you check prices or obtain quotes. So even if it's a $5 item and you're checking prices, if you're like, oh, I can buy milk at Walmart for $3.50, but I can buy 2-gallon milks at Brahms for $5, you already told me that you're doing small purchase. It's anything that you're spending from $0 to $250,000 where you are checking prices. So if, like, you're a daycare center, you do need to check prices at least 2 different qualified stores. If you're a school district and you use a vendor, you need to send specifications out to at least 2 vendors. Now, especially what specifications are, we talk about it a little bit, it's basically like a grocery list. It's what you want them to bid on, and you have to be specific. Do you want a 10-pound roll of 80/20 ground beef? So it's because it is different. A daycare, when they shop at these stores, they're just looking at prices at stores. They can't really send them something and tell Walmart to give us a bid back. So if you are a daycare center or you are small enough and you do check prices, then you just need to make sure you're checking from 2 qualified sources. But if you're using a vendor, you do need to send out specifications because they send that back to you. You can't just go to a store and be like, yeah, we want this at this price and this at this price. So you do have to do specifications. You do need to document your price quotes or any documentation that you might have and why you purchase from a certain supplier. So when you use small purchase procedures, it is not required that you go with the lowest price. If you do not go with the lowest price, you have to justify to us why you did not. And it's okay. Again, you just have to be checking prices. But if you don't go with the lowest source, you need to tell us why. It can be a daycare center and they have a Walmart in their hometown, or say they have just a local grocery store. And in my situation where I grew up, we have no grocery store, but we have a grocery store about 10 miles away, and 30 miles away is the local Walmart. Well, it may be cheaper to go to Walmart, but we have to have a little bit more time for labor to drive to and from, and that's gas and time off to go. So you would just justify why you go to the other store. Maybe you're a school district and it's a service. And the reason you're using one service is because they're local and they are always on time, and they're always on time. Where this other place, it takes a lot longer for them to come out to service you. So it's okay if you don't go with the lowest price, but you do have to justify to us why you use somebody else. So again, the requirement is specifications must be sent out to a minimum of 2 or more vendors. Again, they do not have to respond. As long as you can be like, yep, I sent it to US Foods, Cisco, Tankersley, Mid-America. I don't want to leave anybody out. As long as you send it to 2 people, they don't have to respond to you. But that's just your requirement, is to send it out. You do need to have documentation, so let us know who you sent it out to, who sent it back. And again, this is the preferred method to use if you are using a vendor. But in all honesty, it doesn't matter if it's a $5 item or not. If you checked prices, you did small purchase procedure. And the reason I talk about this is because for school districts, when you're up for review, so this year they're only reviewing schools that are using a food service management company. But we see it a lot on the tool that you'll put, just because of the dollar amount, you put it under micro purchasing. Well, did you go out and check prices? And half the time they're like, yeah, we did. It's like, if you checked prices, then it goes under small purchase. So when you're doing the tool, you have to make sure what you're doing, how you procured it, you put it in the right section. Don't always think about the dollar amount. And sometimes, like this has happened, maybe your threshold was 250,000 and you went 265,000 and you did small purchase. That's okay. We're not going to really get upset about that. We're probably going to be like, yeah, I mean, food costs went up, or, you weren't expecting to feed more kids. We understand you may be on that line and you did, but we may let you know, hey, you may want to think about doing something else for the next year. But always tell us how you procured it, not just the dollar amount. That's not what procurement is just the dollar amount underneath that. That's what you did. That's not procurement. It's how you procured. Did you just spread the wealth, go buy, purchase like most daycares, or did you do small purchase procedures and you sent out bids, or you checked prices? Even if it was $100 item, you still checked a price. That's small purchase. So we do have, for school districts, I think we have one of these for daycares as well, but we do have a vendor contact. You can keep your own list, however you choose to do it, your own documentation, but we do have something here that you can use. I think we have a couple of these in there that you can write down who the vendor was, who you contacted, the date you contacted them, and if they contacted you back. It just lets us know and lets you know of your procurement process that you did.
Hey, Kendra,
Yes.
can I break in just a minute?
Absolutely.
I wanted to answer a couple of questions as we're going here so people don't get too confused.
I know, because it's very confusing.
It really can be. Lori, you ask, let me back up here on my chat just a minute. Do we have to get a quote on every item we use throughout the year from potential vendors, or just a sampling? Well, that's going to depend on how you're procuring. If you're using the small purchase method, then basically, yes, you would want to get pricing on every item. Now, that doesn't mean every time you go to buy items, you need to get pricing. So at the first of the year, let's say you're going to do small purchase procedures, you're spending less than $250,000 a year on your grocery supplies, and maybe you send out a specification list to multiple vendors, and let's say you get back this list and you decide you're going to buy these items from this vendor and these items from that vendor. You're set for the year. You don't have to get pricing every year. Now, someone else asked a question. If we send out bids and we get bids, can we only buy from the one that sent back the bids? Yes. If you send out, say, your specifications and you get back price quotes or even formal in your invitation for bid or request for proposal, you do, let's say you send out to 2 company or 3 companies and you only get bids back from 2. Say company XYZ didn't send you a response. So that makes them a non-responsive bidder. You can't just arbitrarily decide, well, I really like their cereal. I know they didn't return the bid, so I'm going to buy from them. That's an unallowable practice, and that can be an unallowable cost to your child nutrition. Okay, I think somebody asked, so I guess what I want to know is if I can do small purchase, micro purchasing with Cisco. You can do with Cisco, but you would also have to purchase from other vendors. You can't just decide, okay, I'm going to micro purchase from Cisco.
Well, and what does
Because
happen
you're not,
a lot too is you may send out bids and you get them back from 2 people and you may purchase from both of them.
right.
We saw that a lot with the procurement. And actually, I think USDA likes that. It shows that you're buying the lowest price.
You're spreading that out. If you're micro purchasing from those 2 different vendors, that might be okay too. And what I saw, and I know Kendra did too, is sometimes you send price or specifications out and maybe it was a little higher from this vendor, but he or she could deliver the products once a week. The other person with the lower price could only deliver once a month. That's allowable.
Yes.
You're just going to document that to us why you're purchasing that from the other vendor. Okay, Kendra, thank you.
No problem. And something else that you said too is another way that we talk about with micro purchasing is when we talk about multiple sources, we're talking at least 3 sources, at least, because that's multiple. Where small purchase, it says a minimum of 2, a couple. So just make sure. But like I said, if you're a school district, honestly, a lot of times your micro purchases are your emergency purchases, like for food. But if you have sent out a bid to a company and they respond back, then you can use them. A matter of fact, so I did a procurement review on a very large district. And what actually happened was when they were writing out what they did in their procurement tool, they listed all these people and they just put it with how much they spent with them. Well, in reality, what they did was they sent out one bid. They sent out one bid to like 20 different vendors. And they got like 15 responses back and they actually used all 15 of them. So in the procurement tool, they really should have put like the one formal procurement they did, not list every single vendor. It was kind of interesting. So it's just something to think about. It was really smart that this district did that. They're the one that had the really, really low formal procedures, 7,000. But she's like, yeah, no, we send out one bid and put every single specification in that bid. And we send it out to 15 people. And then they respond back of what they will give back to us, what they will do. And it was everything from cleaning to food to paper products. It was everything. So I thought it was pretty smart that they did it that way. But again, it's just however your district chooses to do it.
And schools can also do what we call a market basket. Maybe you're going to do a prime vendor and you send that out. You would use the request for proposal. You wouldn't use the invitation for bid. And I know we're getting ahead of ourselves just a tiny bit.
That's okay.
But in a prime vendor in your market basket, you're going to go with the company that can give you the most advantageous price overall. So you've got to figure out how that market basket overall, which company will give you the best price. And there's different ways to do that. And that's I think that's in the manual on the market baskets.
Yeah. And we will be going over that too, which is great. So we'll give you it'll make a little bit more sense, I think, at the end, when we go through the whole process. Another one, and this is mostly just for schools that we will use non-competitive proposal. Again, it's also emergency situations, but to me, I think of this as more as like your freezer went out, like big items, emergency circumstances. Sometimes you may only be able to buy from one source. or competition is inadequate. Now, there's a difference. There's a difference when you do small purchase procedures and you send out bids and you only get one response back. You still procured that correctly. It's that small purchase. What non-competitive is example, there is our system, our car system. We had to do that, what we call a single source. There was only one person that could create the program that we were wanting at the time, or after we got it. I think we bid it out, and then once they started working on it for the 1,000 years they were working on it, then they were the only ones because they developed it. So we had to do it single source. So we could only get their services from them, and it's mostly having to do with like services. Or if you find that competition isn't adequate, if you find one of those two situations, you do have to have approval from our office before you're allowed to use it. Like I said, if it's an emergency situation, like a big dollar amount emergency situation, we're not going to, that's non-competitive. You just did it because you had to do it. Like I said, your freezer went out. But if it is something that you can really only buy from one source in all of the world or all of America, or the competition is very inadequate. And again, I would say a lot of those equivalent to services, then you need to ask permission from us first before you're authorized to do it. So just kind of remember that situation. Okay, so now we are going to talk about formal procurement. So the one thing I do want to kind of start out with saying is, in the past, it was required, way before my time, it was required that you did your milk bid via formal procurement. That's no longer the case. You are not required to do that. We saw this a lot on procurement reviews. People were like, yeah, we're doing formal procurement on milk. And they're like, it's sealed bid. I'm like, okay, wait, did you actually do formal procurement, or did they just send you a bid in a sealed envelope? And they're like, well, yeah, they just sent us a bid in a sealed envelope. That's not formal procurement. Formal procurement is you have to follow these guidelines. Now, you can do formal procurement for $1,000 item. That's fine. You can do any method under the dollar amount. So you can do formal procurement for $1,000 item. But once you go over your threshold or USDA's threshold, you are required to do formal or small purchase or whatever it is. But you can always do it underneath the amount. But once you go over a certain dollar amount, that's when you're required to do the next item. So anything over $250,000 or whatever your purchase is, whatever your procurement plan says, you have to do formal procurement. Again, you have to write specifications, and you do have to submit those to at least 2 vendors. This is the part where people don't understand. If you do formal procurement, you are required to put an advertisement in a newspaper. You can put advertisements also on your website. You can put advertisements in other places, but you are required to put an advertisement in a paper when you do formal procurement. Again, you do have to submit it to at least 2 people, but they don't have to send it back. But you have to follow the proper procurement guidelines. When you do formal procurement and you'll list it in the advertisement, you do have to have a specific date and time when that has to be back to you. And you cannot open bids before that time, and you cannot accept a bid after that time. So if you put that the bids are due tomorrow, January 29th at noon, you cannot open a bid till January 29th at noon. You can't open any of them. And if it's 12:01 or 12:05, you cannot accept any other bids. If you don't already have it by noon on the date you specified, you cannot accept it. And really, that's for small purchase as well. But you do have to have a whole bid opening for formal procurement, and you do list that in your advertisement. So when you do a formal procurement, USDA does suggest you do a 45-day between your advertising and between opening the bid for your sealed bid, or we call it invitation for bid. And they do like you to have a 60-day period from the day that you advertise to the day that you do a request for proposal. So there are certain timelines that you do have to do when you're doing with formal procurement. Regardless, whatever system you use, it cannot be less than 30 days. For food service management company, it is an RFP, and we have allowed 30 days at the minimum. It cannot be before 30 days. You have to give time for people to bid. That's why if you're not creating free and open competition, if you're like, I submit it out today and say I need it by Monday, you're not giving time for people to look at it and give you good pricing back. You have to give them time to price. There's not these requirements with a small purchase, but again, we do suggest you need to give people time, because no one's going to bid if you don't give them time to look at it and submit something back to you. So an invitation for bid, what is that? When you do an invitation for bid, or we call a sealed bid, when you open it up, so if you have your bid opening on January 29th at noon, when you open them up right then and there, you have to go with the lowest price, no exception. Because when you send out your specifications, when they sent something back to you, they said, yep, we can do exactly what you told us to do in your bid. So that means if you do a sealed bid, you're going with the lowest price that was given to you. No exceptions. You can't be like, well, but no, whatever you said in your statement, if you said you want them to deliver to you twice a week, you said you gave them all these terms and conditions. If they give you a bid back, then they said that they could go with these terms and conditions and your specifications. Lowest bid, no negotiating. That's it. It's over. If you do a request for proposal, it's a little bit different. If it is required, if you use a food service management company, you do have to use our RFP, and you do have to contact Becky Gray for that. And it doesn't matter if you spend $10,000 a year or whatever you spend on child nutrition. If you use a food service management company, you are required to do an RFP and follow federal procurement guidelines. And so again, you need to contact Becky for that. The one difference between the sealed bid and the RFP is a contract is weighted. It's not just on price. You don't open them right then and there. So sealed bid, you open it up, lowest price, you got it. I can tell you right then and there who won the bid. An RFP is different. It is a weighted evaluation. It's not, price is the main factor, but it's not the only factor. So a lot of times that's why an RFP is a food service management company, because you're not always going just based on price. Again, maybe you have other factors or services that you want. And so price is a factor, but it's not the primary factor of why you're using that contract. So what you have to do in an RFP is you have to do an evaluation criteria. And this is just an example of one. This one is actually from our food service management company contract. So what you do is before you send out your bid, you have to tell us how many points you're going to get for price, how many points you're going to get for quality, how many points you're going to get for services. So price always has to be the main. So let's just say you have to have 100 points total. Let's give 50 points for price. Let's give 25 points for service and 25 points for quality. You don't have to have it for all of them. We give you examples of what you can do, and you can even add your own in. But in, say, our situation, we're just going to add 50 points for price, 25 points for service, and 25 points for quality. So what happens is when you get the bids back, you open them up, but you have to go in. Usually you have a team. So let's say you have a team of 4 people, and you give them each the criteria plan, and then you give them each, or let everybody see a copy of the contracts that you got back, and everybody has to score them. So if one give you a low price, then you give them the lowest price one, say you would give 50 points to. The one that gave you the second lowest price, you'd give 45 points to. The one that gave you the highest price, let's say you gave 30 points to. But everybody can pick their own, everybody has to use the same point scale, but everybody can give them the different points that they want. So maybe one gives them on service a 15, one gives them a 30, or we said 25. So say 25, one gives them a 15. So whoever has the most points, when you add them all together, that's who will get the contract. So you may open up the bidding and you can talk about the bidding, but you usually don't know until after everybody evaluates. And also with an RFP, you can have what's called a negotiation period, where you can negotiate with each of them. But when you negotiate, you do have to reach out to all that did supply an RFP. So it's just a little bit different with the sealed bid. Sealed bid is done the minute you open them up and you see the lowest price. An RFP is a little bit different. And if you do use an RFP or request for proposal, again, you can contact Dana, myself, and Mona King and Robin and Becky too, because Becky deals with RFPs all the time with food service management companies. So if you have some questions regarding how to do this formal procurement, we can help you with that because we've looked at them. And like I said, it's a learning curve for all, but this is why we say if you can do small purchase, do small purchase. So you decided to do formal, or you were required to do formal. So if you do formal, not only do you, that's the process you have to do, but now you have to have formal forms and clauses. So schools only, you have to have Buy American information. You do have to have USDA equal opportunity information on any contract over $10,000 or more. You have to have information there regarding termination for cause on any contract over 10,000. You have to have Clean Water Act provision. And again, if you use our procurement plan, this is all in our procurement plan, so you can copy and kind of paste this stuff in. You also have to have contract work hours and safety standards for contracts over 2,500 or more. And I believe that one is if it's a contract, like a construction contract. And this is for everybody. If you have to have a non-kickback affidavit for any purchase orders over 25,000. That does go for everyone. Davis Bacon information. Oh, that's the construction one. I'm sorry, I got the construction wrong. That is for any construction contracts over $2,000. Again, debarment and suspension. It's for all formal, and then any anti-lobbying form, and it's over any contract over $100,000. So again, you can do formal procurement spending $5,000. You can do that. But we would highly suggest not doing formal because you have to have all these clauses and all these forms. In the procurement plan that is in other documents in CARS, we did put in there a checklist. This checklist is in there. So if you are doing formal, you will know what you need to have in either the contract or what forms you need to have back whenever it's awarded. It's not the simplest process, so that's why we say if you could stick with small purchase, that would be ideal. Now, a district cannot arbitrarily divide purchases to fall below simplified acquisitions just to avoid doing formal procurement. But I will tell you, even some large school districts fall under formal because they do split it up. They may buy their fruits and veggies from one vendor. They buy their milk from another vendor. They buy their bread from a vendor. They buy frozen foods from a vendor. They're doing that because they're getting the best price. We're going to talk about what that is when you award the bid. But again, we're talking about an overall contract with that company is the dollar amount. That once you go over that dollar amount, you are required to do small purchase. You're required to do formal. But if you're checking prices and it's a $5 item, you did small purchase because you checked prices. If you want to do a sealed bid for milk and you only spend $10,000 with the milk company, you can do that. It's not required, and we would not suggest it because a lot of them, you're not following procurement. So again, even with milk, we get that all the time. There's only one milk vendor. Well, there may be one milk vendor that services you, but you still have to send out to multiple people. There are more than one milk vendor in the state of Oklahoma, but you can also send your milk bid to your food vendor. Cisco, Benny Keith, Tankersley, Gadarian, Mid-America. Some of them actually keep, like, I know Borden got sold, but some of those actually would carry Borden milk. So you have to send it out, even if it's milk. And I know you think there's only one vendor, you still have to send it out to multiple vendors. And again, it can be your food vendor. I will tell you now, your food vendor might be cheaper, but a lot of times people will be like, no, one quality. And then a lot of times, like say Highland, they will give you credit for any milk that's expired or anything like that, where mostly a food vendor would not. So again, if it comes over the price, you could say this is why you're using quality. Because I will say the milk is, I've been to some schools that have used their vendor milk and they changed back the next year because the quality wasn't as good. So, but again, this is for everything. Milk, you have to send it to more. We see that quite a bit. A lot of people with milk, You have to send it to more than one person. We have this flow chart if it's something that will be helpful for you. This is located in the resource library. It is called the procurement flow chart. So you can get this. Again, it just helps you know to make sure you're using the correct procurement method. So now that we talked about your methods, let's talk about solicitation. So what is not allowed? It is not allowed for a potential contractor to write the bid proposal or any of the product specifications. This has to be done at the district. Any potential contractor evaluating a bid or proposal submitted by a competitor, you can't do that. And any purchases without following procurement procedures is not allowed. Again, you just have to explain to us why. Like I said, maybe your water heater went out for your dishwasher. We understand sometimes you might have an emergency purchase. We get that, but you just need to make sure you're telling us what procedure you did when it comes to the procurement review. Because when we do a procurement review, we ask to see your expenditures. So we're gonna see every dollar that was spent on child nutrition and what the items were. And some people have gotten written up too because there were items on there that were not for child nutrition, but were spent with child nutrition funds. We'll make you pay that back. So that's what happens is we ask to see your expenditures of what you did for child nutrition from the previous school year. Usually. Sometimes we'll ask for both this year. Will you ask for current year and possibly last year for sure, but we may ask for current year as well. So it is recommended that you do need to send out a solicitation letter when you send out your specifications. And what all are the items that should be on your solicitation letter? It should be on letterhead. You need to have the date of the letter. You need to have your method of response. How do you want them to respond to you? Is it a sealed bid? Do they need to have it back on this date? At this time, you're going to do your bid opening. Can they send it back to you by email? How is it that they can send it back to you? You need to give them a deadline to send back the quotes because again, if that deadline passes, then that is a non-responsive. And I will say, I know COVID's been a weird year, but maybe in your chart of procedures, you say for your food vendor that you send out specifications once a year and you do it small purchase. And I've had this happen to some of my schools that in the middle of the year, the contract, they were not doing what they said they would do. So they went out on rebid, and you can definitely do that. And a matter of fact, when they went on rebid, somebody else came into the territory because they thought they had one vendor and they were able to use somebody else. You need to have in there anything that you want. What do you want for substitutions or shortages? This is something I'd have that's really important. Like tell them, you cannot substitute anything on me unless you call me first. I won't accept it. We will not accept substitutions unless you call me first. Or shortages, do they need to call you? What do you want them to do? Because this is kind of your terms and conditions. If you're doing small purchase procedures, to me, this is your terms and conditions. I would even, when they say, yes, we can provide this for you, I'd make them sign the bottom of it saying, yes, we're agreeing to all this. Put in your solicitation letter, we want it delivered once a month or once a week at 2 p.m. or, specify everything that you want in your solicitation letter. Let them know what you're looking for because the more information you can give them, the better. When they respond, they're saying that they can do that. Now, there may be a negotiation. I understand you're in a rural area, and ideally, you would like to get something twice a week, but you can only get it once a week. But you need to let them know some items that you are looking for. You do need to have an equal opportunity employment statement in there. And again, you do need to have Buy American. Even if it's for small purchase, you do need to have Buy American because it is a requirement on your AR, on your administrative review. Again, I would put terminations for cause. I would tell them, like, if you don't meet our food descriptions, I've had some people that they said like they were getting spoiled fruits and veggies and be like, if I have to call you 3 times with the same issue, put it in the letter. If I have to call you 3 times with the same issue and it's not resolved, then we can terminate the contract. Again, this is even for small purchase. You can tell them because I think it's very smart for you. You need to tell them like, listen, if you do X, Y, and Z, this is the consequences. Any special conditions, I let them know that you want only CN labeled products. If you substitute CN labeled products, you have to be for another CN labeled product. Tell them that you want your nutrition facts labels. That and like in your specification, you should be telling them the quality of food and the quantity that you're wanting. So these are some things that you can have in your solicitation letter. Now we have an example of a solicitation letter. Um, you can use your own. We don't really have a prototype for you to do, but we do have like the slides just to kind of help you of some things to think about of what you may want to put in your letter. And it could be in an email. Send it an email, but I would definitely let them know the terms and conditions, because if you don't tell them that you want it delivered once a week, they're going to do what they want to do. And maybe they say, hey, listen, we can't do once a week, but we can do twice a week. But you can work with them. I understand in that way, but really, you need to be telling them what you want. And we've had some, like I said, that they said they would do X, Y, and Z, and they didn't. And one was the quality of food, and then what happened too is they said that they would deliver once a week, and then they quit, said nope, we're only going to come every 2 weeks. So that's when they went with another vendor. So product specifications, we've been talking about that. What it is it's a clear and accurate description of the goods and services that you want to procure. It's essentially your grocery list. It ensures the purchase of quality food at a competitive price. It is written clear so everybody knows what you want. So when you write it and you give it to multiple vendors, they're all bidding on the exact same thing. Now, brand name products only are allowed if an institution accepts an alternative product to the bid or price quote given. So what that means is you cannot put you're not really allowed to put like Tyson CN labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the only thing you'll accept, because maybe vendor A has it, but vendor B and C don't have that exact product. But what you can do is put, you want like Tyson chicken nugget, CN label number, and then you can say equal to or better than product. So, because this other companies may have something very similar to that, it's just not a Tyson product. But you really are not allowed to use brand names. So you can't say like, I want Dole number 10 can crushed pineapple light syrup. You can say you want pineapple crush number 10 can, but you're really not supposed to put any brands. If you do put a brand name, you have to put equal to or better than, because everybody needs to be able to bid on that product. You do need to be simple and precise. It needs to be clear and understandable. Hopefully it can be met by at least 2 vendors. And again, any terms and conditions, like you want it to be whole grain rich or CN labeled. Now, we are talking about child nutrition, and I'm waiting for this question, and it may have already arose. Yes, you are supposed to do specifications for every single thing that you purchase with child nutrition funds. Now, when we talk about food, when I was out doing reviews, they would say the same thing. Like, do you mean I have to do this for like pepper and salt and trash bags? Eventually, yes, you really do. But when you're doing specifications, we say start small. Start with your big items. Start with your meats that you use. Start with your fruits and vegetables. Start there. Maybe every day list 10 items. And then eventually you're going to have everything in your kitchen on a specification. There, again, it's your grocery list. Now, I know I'm particular when I go to the grocery store myself. I want certain sizes. I want certain products. I want like, example, my trash can at home is a smaller trash can than a 13-gallon trash can. So I don't want 13-gallon trash bags. I want the medium-sized trash bags. Well, if I'm not telling you that, how do you know to bid that back? Maybe you want 90-10 ground beef in a 5-pound roll instead of an 80-20 ground beef in a 10-pound roll. You need to be specific about what you want. Because what happens is say you want ground beef 10-pound roll, and you send it to 3 vendors, and all 3 of them send it back to you, and you get like, I'm just making up numbers, but say you get like $50 a roll, then you get like a $25 a roll and a $30 a roll. I'm just making up numbers. Well, maybe one that paid the $50 roll, that was for 93.7 ground beef, and the cheapest one was 80-20. So it wasn't apples to apples that you were. That's why you have to be specific. That's why they're called specifications. It's being specific about what you want, so everybody can bid on the same thing, and that way you're getting a better price. Because it is discouraging when you say you want ground beef in a 10-pound roll, and then you're like, oh, we got the lowest price, and you order it, and you're like, well, that's not what I wanted. This is 80-20. I wanted 93.7. So that's why you need to be specific, because they bid on what they thought you were wanting. So they just gave you a price because they're probably going to give you the lowest price that they have. So you need to be specific. We have this example in the training manual for schools. Actually, I think we may have it for daycares too, but this is just an example to show you what they look like. And you can make your own. You can do it on Excel. You can make them however, but this is just something to show you what specifications do look like. Again, we have another example. These are some common items. How do you want it? How do you want them to bid? So again, start small. Don't get overwhelmed. Maybe every day write 10 items down. Maybe once a week you write 20 items down on a piece of paper. Start small. Don't get overwhelmed. When we do procurement reviews, we do ask to see your specifications. And a lot of times what I would ask for corrective action is like 2 or 3 pages of specifications written, but our pages had like 10 items on it. And we gave them like a month to do it. So don't be overwhelmed by this, but just start slow. And this is something you do need to work towards. And this has always been, I mean, I've been doing this job. I know Dana's been in the school for 20 some years. I shouldn't have said that, but I've been doing this job for 13, and specifications have always been required. And everybody gives us the deer in the headlights look when we show up at a school and say, I need to see your specifications. So now remember, for solicitation, write down the types and goods and services and the quantities and the frequency and the quality that you want. Write a solicitation document, and then determine the sources to be contacted, and then contact those sources. And again, this is a work in progress. We're not asking for perfection from day one. We're asking for you to work towards this. So I hope that helps. We don't want you to be overwhelmed. We understand, I mean, there's a lot going on in general, and this is one more thing on top of child nutrition that you have to do. It will become second nature to you. We are still all learning, but again, just please try to work towards this. Now we're gonna talk about farm to everything. This is when you serve local foods in, it could be childcare, it can be school. It's whatever that's why we call it farm to everything, because we have farm to school, we have farm to daycare, we have farm to summer, we have farm to everything. So you can use local foods. You can hold taste tests and demonstrations. You can use a garden. You can have things. I will tell you. So we have daycares too, but you can have a school garden and you can use the items in the garden. If you're a daycare, again, you can use a garden as well, but you do need to keep inventory on it if you're a daycare, for sure, because if you don't have receipts for these items, we're going to think that you didn't purchase it. Now, one thing about if you use a garden, you do have to use it in the sense of with a garden, you can use it in the tomatoes. I'm going to use tomatoes as my example. People can also give you tomatoes. You can, not a daycare, you can't take donations, but if you have a garden, you can have tomatoes. What you can't do is say you have somebody and they take all their tomatoes and then make a salsa out of it and then give you the salsa. It has to be in the original form. And that is a health department issue because we don't know what happened behind the scenes. You can accept the vegetables, but you can't accept it in a different form. You can visit farms, have some culinary activities, and any food related education. We have, like in CACFP in our daycare side, you can buy with child nutrition funds, you can buy seeds for a garden. Gardens are great, but you can definitely use items from a garden. Also, when it comes to farm to everything with school districts, a lot of times someone may want to donate meat, like donate a pig, donate a steer. You can do that. A school district can. You can use donated items, but if you're a school, it has to be processed in a state or federally inspected processor. So you can't just be my dad's shed processing there. It has to be at a processor that is state or federal. It's supposed to be federal, but in the state of Oklahoma, they follow federal guidelines. They don't have any less than that. So you can use a state. But if it is over state lines, so say you're up by Kansas, it has to be federal. It can't nothing, no meat in general in the entire state of in United States of America, no meat can be transferred across state lines unless it's in a processed with your food, your grocery stores and such, unless it's in a federally processed. So some local foods, again, there's distributors, there's farmers. I've had two schools that I know of that have used farmers. I've been there doing a review and a farmer came in and said, "Hey, I have onions. Would you want to buy onions from me?" You can definitely buy from farmers. You can buy from farmers markets. A lot of times we'll have some CACFP or daycare side that does that, or from farm stands. Again, from local gardens you can purchase from. So these are some local foods, but people are surprised when we say that yes, you can have a garden and that yes, you can service food from that garden. So we've talked about the methods of procurement, and we've talked about like how do you send out solicitations. So let's talk about how you award the bid. So when you award the bid, it's when you receive the price quotes back and at the rate that they're going to the rate that you're going to pay for the items. The one thing again with all the procurement is you need to document. Again, any potential contractor that responded, whoever you sent it out to, your quotes or your receipt, your rates, the date you receive it, the quantity, goods, and frequency of your services, and again, your procurement period or any renewals. So with any formal procurement, I'm not for sure if you can do this with small purchase. We need to find this out. But when you do use formal procurement, an RFP or a sealed bid, you are allowed to have renewals. So the food service management company is a great example of this. So the contracts are a year-to-year contract, but you allow for in food service management company, you allow for up to 4 renewal periods. That means at the end of each year, you can decide that you want to, you can terminate, but a lot of times you're still using that original contract, but you're renewing the contract. You can do it up to 5 years. I've seen a couple of schools that have used formal procurement that they have done it a 3-year renewal and they've done up to 5-year renewals. So that way, when you are doing formal procurement, you're not doing it every single year. You're doing a 1-year base contract with up to 5 renewals, but this has to be specified in your original contract. We've had it before. We're like,
Kendra,
well, I would, yes.
as you said that, I don't think that would be allowed in your small purchase procedures because it's not a formal contract.
Perfect. We've had some schools ask this question and we've never really looked at it. So I was like, I don't think you can.
No, just because looking at, remember on the procurement tool where it talks about,
the renewals.
Yeah, renewals. It had to be in a formal contract.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
But you cannot do a renewal unless it's specified in your contract. So what's going to happen is like with this district, they're like, well, we didn't send out a bid this year. And I'm like, well, I need to see the renewal agreement. And so they sent me the renewal agreement. And then I said, I need to see the original contract. And it did state in there that this is a contract with up to 2 or 4 renewals. So that contract was good for 3 years or 5 years or however long you want it. It can't go past 5 years. It can be 5 years or less. So if you do that, it needs to be specified in your contract that this is a 5-year contract. It's 1 year with up to 4-year renewals. But you can't just be like, nope, I didn't send out bids this year because I did formal procurement and I didn't want to. So I'm just going to use the same contract. You can't do that unless it says in the contract that it is a renewal, that you're renewing that contract. So our food service management company is a big one that's that way. Again, at the end of every year, you can terminate the contract, or you can renew it. That's what it's meaning. It's not meaning you're tied into that contract for that long. It means every year it's up. You can terminate, but you can also renew it without having to go out for rebid. So how do you award the bid? So you can award it by prime vendor, which is most of the cases. It's all or nothing. It's like it's kind of like going lowest price. You can do it by market basket or product groupings, or you can do it by line item. And I'm going to go over which each of these are. The most common one is prime vendor, where it's all or nothing. And it means that you spend at least 80% or more of food purchases from one source. So a lot of you maybe only have one vendor, but you may buy some other things from other people, like maybe Highland. So let's say you have Highland and Cisco, Just throwing two of them out there, and you buy 80% from Cisco and you buy 20% from Highland. That's fine. Um, Another thing with what is the deal with prime vendor? Some advantage to that is a district only deals with one supplier. Orders are placed, delivered, and invoiced with, again, just one supplier. Now, some of you don't have a choice. You only kind of get one supplier, but this is just some advantages if you want to go prime vendor. A lot of people do. Some disadvantages are some items may cost a little bit more since they are mixed together with the calculations for all products. So you're taking into consideration all the products. It may limit the number of responding vendors. And honestly, I think in Oklahoma, most of the time, a lot of schools only have a prime vendor. I think closer to the metros, they can get more than one to service them, but we do understand that this may be your only option. But again, when you're doing procurement, when you're sending out information, your requirement is to send it out to at least two vendors, but you may only get one response, and that's okay. You did what you're supposed to do. This is another very common one is market basket. It's when you go with the bidder with the lowest price that receives an award based on the total prices when all items are combined. So an example of this, or we call it grouping. So maybe like we were talking with some schools, maybe you buy your fruits and vegetables from one, or maybe you're going to solicit out for cleaning products, or maybe you're going to do most of your food, or bread could be one. You do it in a market basket. So what does a market basket, some advantages to doing it that way is it does allow for more vendors to bid on it. Volumes for the entire lot tend to be larger, so pricing is strong. It limits the total number of suppliers to a manageable level, and it provides opportunity to purchase specialty items. Now, some of the disadvantages are some suppliers may not be able to supply all the items, and some lots may not be large enough or the volume to warrant sufficient competition. So if you're a small school, this is going to be really hard to do. A lot of times they're going to have a certain amount that you have to spend before they will come out. So if you're not spending a certain amount, it may not be worthwhile. So this is line item, and my favorite, because Dana's on here, I'm going to talk about what line item is. I'm going to talk about the advantages and disadvantages, and then Dana has a quick story for you regarding line item. So what line item is you are awarding the bid separately to the lowest bidder by products. So you can get some really good prices on this. However, you need to remember what products you bought from what vendor. You may not be able to meet the distributor's minimum for delivery. You may not be able to have the limit of number of responding. You may not have many that will respond to it, and you may actually cost you more in the long run. To me, this is only something like a really large school district could probably get by with, but to me, you would almost have to have one person solely in charge of just procurement and keeping up with it. So Dana, I'm gonna let you really quick talk about your experience.
My lovely story, my line item story.
Yes.
We had been in McAllister schools with Airmark for several years, a management company, and we were going back self-op. So of course I had to figure out how to do procurement like the rest of you. And we were not a large school district, but did spend well over at that time the small purchase threshold. So I had to do formal bid. I thought I was basically doing a market basket bid. Well, I did a line item bid. I sent out to 5 different vendors. And when we figured out it was really a line item bid, I was told I had to buy the lowest priced item from each of those from the particular vendor that had the lowest priced. So that meant I had 10 schools, 5 vendors that were backing up to the door every Monday morning. You can imagine the horror of my cafeteria managers when they realized they had to, buy this group of items from vendor A, this group of items from vendor B, this from C, D, and E, plus the number of invoices. It was a complete total nightmare. We did get that narrowed down a little bit by about October, November. Then the next year I did a prime vendor bid where we only purchased from one vendor. So be careful how you bid, that you're not stuck with some kind of process that is not very advantageous for your school.
Like I said, the labor cost, I can't imagine the labor on that alone. You would really have to have one person that all they did was manage that bid.
Well,
And-
that was
and
my accounts payable person is really the one that she and I had a conversation. She said, I can't pay all these this is just driving me crazy. I've, got 5 invoices times 10 schools times, 4 weeks in a month. It was absolutely
insane.
a nightmare.
So it's not really suggested, but it is an option. Like I said, the most common we see is market basket. Like we'll see people buy their bread from a vendor. They send out separate bids, one for milk, one for bread, one for fruits and vegetables. So that's more market basket. Or then we have, again, most of the schools do prime, where you're mostly using one vendor. So anyway, that's my favorite story. We do have, if you want to do that, we do have a sheet that you can use. And we have something, I think we have 2 sheets. This was just one of them that you can list the item and then the price that you got back from what vendor. But again, it's just a lot of work. It's a lot of tedious work to do things by line item. So I'm not going to talk about this very much at all, about contracting for food service. Really, most of this is not for schools, but I will say if you are interested in doing a food service management company contract, you are required to do an RFP, and Becky Gray is the person that you would contact for that contract. Lots of C words in there. So again, if food service management company is something that you're wanting, you have to use our prototype. We don't have a prototype for anybody else. The only thing we have is a procurement plan prototype that your school district can adopt. Again, print it out. It will ask you like your school name, and it will ask, for instance, on small purchase, what's your small purchase threshold? Is it the 250,000 or is it less? If it's less, you mark less, and then you put what your school district's is. So it's not very much to do. It's 14 pages, yes, but it has all the information in there that we talked about. Even if you're not doing, say, formal procedures, keep it in there. And the reason we say that is because maybe one year you do go food service management company. There's even a marking, if there's food service management company, it says, you mark and it says food service management company only. But just keep it all in there because it's your methods. It means if it happens, this is what you're doing. So if you take it out and then something happens and you do it, then you're going to get written up because it wasn't in your procurement plan. So that's why we say just leave the procurement plan alone. It's just your methods. And then say you do have to do formal procurement. Then you can go back to your procurement plan and read it, and it helps you through the steps of what to do. So I'm not going to talk about food service management. For CACFP, this is our daycare side because no one's really on here. Now, I do want to let schools know this. This is for daycare. If you are contracting with the daycare as a school district, I'm sure you are aware, but you are required to charge the minimum free rate for breakfast, the free rate plus the value of commodities plus the 7 cents, and you have to charge them the free rate for snack. Whatever they're contracting with you, you are required to charge them that in the contract. You can't charge them less than what's on the Schedule B. Now, something that we've kind of really stated this year to our daycare centers is, so your fiscal year is July 1 to June 30th, but a daycare's fiscal year for child nutrition is October 1st to September 30th. That's our federal fiscal year. So we did tell them that if they do contract with the school district, that you do need to they have to get a new contract from you in July on your fiscal year, not on their fiscal year. So just something that we have been letting them know about. And something else I just kind of want to, if you are contracting with a daycare, you have to make sure that you are following CACFP guidelines. They are different than National School Lunch. The serving size per day can be different, and then they have sugar limitations, which you guys don't have. So if you are contracting with a daycare, you need to make sure, I know that you're giving them the same items that are on the line, but you have to make sure you're meeting the correct quantity amounts, because a daycare center, again, you may be giving them 1 ounce of meat, but they have like a 3-year-old and they need 1.5 ounces of meat. And so you're shorting them, and then they're going to get in trouble, and then they're going to come back to you. We're going to take back money. So make sure you're following CACFP meal patterns. And again, They have sugar requirements. They can't have sugar. They are limited to sugar in their cereal and yogurt, and they cannot have anything what we call a grain-based dessert, and that's cookies or anything like that. That's not allowed on their program. So if it's part of the reimbursable meal, like if you're giving yogurt for breakfast and it's over the sugar requirements, then they're going to get written up. So if they're contracting with you, you're supposed to be following CACFP guidelines. So now let's talk about managing the contract. So once you award the contract, this is the step that but this is the step that you really have to do. You have to manage that contract. Are you getting the right services and products? Are you getting the right quantity, the right time, the location at the right cost? I had one of the first schools I ever went into. The lady was really good, and she told her girls, she's like, when you get the invoice, you need to make sure it's this price. If it's not, or if it's the same item that we're supposed to have, and she said if it's not, I made them put it back on the truck. Several times they substituted, they didn't call her, and it specifically said you cannot just substitute products on me. She said they did it twice. She said after twice they learned their lesson because I made them put it back on the truck and take it back with them. It wasn't staying at the school. And they were tired of walking around the stuff that they erroneously gave to the district. So you have to manage the contract, because if not, they can inflate prices. They could give you products that you did not want. Now, I'm not saying, now they may say like, hey, listen, we have a good product that just came in. This is very popular. You may want to try it. That's different than just substituting it on you. Like you get this certain CN label chicken nugget. It was in your specifications and it wasn't there. So then they just substitute a chicken nugget. It's kind of different if they're like, hey, I think this is something you should try. Check it out. Do a taste test. Do this at your school. That's different than just substituting because and not calling you and even though you said to, just because they wanted to. They are, I mean, I'm sorry, but they're salesmen. So I learned, I was part of a women's organization, and the salesman that I used, I followed actually federal procurement procedures because it's just in my bones. Because we did a food fundraiser, and the guy who was the vendor I knew, and he was telling us that like, yeah, came over and gave everybody like free water bottles, like squirt bottles, and he was like, oh yeah, like if I sell every box of these I sell, I get like $10 in commission for it. So sometimes they may be slipping you products that you didn't want, but the reason they did that is because they get a commission off of that product if they sell it. So again, just make sure you're checking your items and you're managing that contract. Again, with your agreement, make sure it's clear and concise contract terms and conditions. Communicate with your contractor, contract management plan, and then train your employees like this one did. She's like, no, if it's not, if this invoice does not match what I told them that we wanted, then they have to put that item back on the truck. And I get that that can be really hard when you get things, say, once a week, every 2 weeks. But if you're not gonna, you have to deal with the issues, because if not, they're just gonna keep running all over you. And I will tell you too, something to think about when you are doing your bids. Now, they're supposed to be abiding by the prices. So when they give you a price, they should be abiding by it. But I'll tell you, like fruits and veggies, it's going to escalate and de-escalate. With milk, it is in the contract of escalating and de-escalating. But what you may want to consider doing is maybe doing your bids every semester. So maybe at December, and then like every semester, you'll probably get better pricing because they can lock in that price. I had one, and it was a medium-sized school district, and because she had all of her vendors in her email and she already had her specifications, she literally did procurement monthly. Every month she sent her specifications and wanted it back because she wrote them one time. I mean, if you've already written your specifications, you're not rewriting it. She would send it out every month. You could send it out every 2 months, and then get prices back. But just to let you know, when it comes to pricing, they need to stick to that pricing. Maybe you want to put something about de-escalation and escalating, about fruits and veggies and such, but really I know it's hard for them, but they really need to be honoring the price that they gave you. But if not, maybe shorten instead of doing it once a year, do it 2 or 3 times a year. So just something to think about when it comes to doing your bids. So now let's talk about record keeping. This is for CACFP. I'm not going to talk about them. For schools, again, procurement reviews, we use your prior year documentation. The reason why is like, for instance, when we come out to do an AR, we look at the last month that you claimed. Well, when it comes to procurement, we have to look at the last year you procured. We can't look at your current year because you're not done with it yet. So we always look at your previous year, but we will look at your food service management company information from the current year. Now, we may look at 2 years. There's a couple reasons why we might. One is if you were self-op and went to food service management company, we'll look at both years. Or if you were self-op and go to food service management company, or if you're a food service management company and go self-operational, we may look at both years. So how often do we do your reviews? This is per USDA. This is not from us. If you are not using a food service management company, you'll get reviewed every 5 years. If you were supposed to get reviewed this year, I think Robin did do 2 of those reviews. You won't get reviewed next year. We'll probably stick you back in the original once that year's over, but you're not reviewed this year. We're adding an extra cycle. But if you are using a food service management company, we are still required to do those reviews, and we are doing them this year. It's just a USDA rule. It's hard on us to have a 3-year cycle and a 5-year cycle, and we're having to constantly keep up with who's food service management company, who's not. So we tried to put your food service management company, your procurement review and your administrative review in the same year. We tried. Now, if you're a food service management company, that's every 3 years, and your AR now is every 5 years. But if you were self-op and then, or food service management company went back to self-operational, we'll put you back in there, but we have to abide by these year rules. So we can do it less than 5 years, but we try to keep it with your actual AR review. But food service management company, every 3 years, you have to have a procurement review, and then every 5 years is your administrative review. So these are just some of the documents that we will ask to see when we do a procurement review. We will send you a procurement tool, and you have to fill that out. Again, I think we're going in our 5th year, because we had a 3-year cycle, and then now we went cycle 1 and we're back to cycle 2. This is our 5th year. We are contracting with Robin. If you did the procurement tool, it's really easy. We keep on telling us they're going to change it. They haven't changed it yet, but it's an Excel file, but you fill out 1 page, just 1 page. And then the rest of the tabs is the actual review. So it's really easy to do. All you're doing is taking your expenditures of what you spent, and then you put it how you procured it. And if you didn't have a food service management company, you don't fill that section out. If you didn't do formal procurement, you don't fill that section out. So it's not bad filling out the review. People think it's a lot worse. It looks a lot worse, but the rest of it is actually the actual review, not what you fill out. So again, invoices, make sure that on your invoices that you are signing and dating those invoices. Just some more about procurement. Any encumbrances and purchases, you must make sure that it's encumbered before goods and services are ordered. Again, you must sign and date your invoices. Need your price quote comparison and bid. Just maintain all that information. Put it in your bid year information, and we'll take a look at that. And again, for everybody, any non-kickback affidavit has to be notarized form for any purchase order over $25,000. You do need to keep your documentation. You have to keep your past 3 years information after the final payment, or until all audit or protest findings are resolved. So you can keep it up to 3 years unless you're in the middle of an audit that would look back at those records. Once that audit is completed, then you would be able to dismiss those records. So we do have procurement information for you. If your school, it's in CARS under other documents, we have a procurement section. In the child nutrition manual, you can look under the procurement section for both daycare and for CACFP. I need to make sure I put CACFP. This is for schools. And then also, if you want more information, it's called the Institute of Child Nutrition. It is an online training, self-paced. I actually just put out yesterday. You can go out to the resource library under training, and we put instructions on how to go out to ICN and how to look for trainings. So if you need any more information about procurement, you can go out there as well. And then we don't have any daycares, but again, their stuff, if you, it's in the resource library. We have a training section for them as well. And then of course, ICN. We are finished today. I hope you feel like you learned some stuff. I hope it wasn't too overwhelming. I hope you felt it was a little bit easier to understand procurement. And again, like I said, not as overwhelming as it seems to be. We will send out certificates. I want to thank Dana and Becky so much for answering questions and being on the call today. It's very helpful. Again, you can always reach out to me, Dana, or Mona, or Robin with any procurement questions. We just worked on it the most, so I feel like we understand it the most. And either consultants may say, hey, contact them. But thank you guys again for coming. We're going to stick around for just a little bit to answer some questions. If you have any, I'll put some music back on. And thank you guys so much for joining us today.